if it could be pasand
Hi everybody, you're listening to the Khandaan podcast by the You Podcast team, a bi-weekly podcast revisiting the movies of Amir Khan, Salman Khan and Shahrukh Khan.
Every show we pick a random year from 3 decades of collectively 300 films the Khans have done and let our listeners vote which movie we should talk about. So it's entirely up to you.
Pick a team, make a vote, take us down nostalgia lane, punish us, or make us reassess a movie we dismissed.
We love the Khans, most of us, sometimes. And we would love for you all to be part of our Khandaan, because when it comes to the Khans in Bollywood, nothing else really matters.
And we are back with Khandaan podcast. My name is Asim Bernie, and I hope you guys missed us because we missed you. And I am here with my co-host Kuchi, Koka, Pupu, and Lola. Hi guys, I missed you all.
Whoever is poo-poo, I'm not it. I just want to say.
So we're talking about DDLJ this week, Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge. And one of the questions that was asked on Twitter, why this movie? So Amrita, why this movie?
Okay, mea culpa. Like, it was me that chose this movie. And look, I know people think that we just talk about weird movies of the Khans, but that's actually not our brief. We talk about all the movies of the Khans. So eventually we were going to do all their big hits, you know, like Hum Aapke Hain Kaun, DDLJ, Lagan. These are the movies that sort of cemented the Khans as who they are today in our pop culture.
This is almost Bollywood 101, nah? You cannot talk about Hindi cinema without... And it's almost surprising that we haven't gotten to them until now, right? We've been skirting it around. We've done K3G, we've done Kuch Kuch Hota Hai, but we've not talked about the mother of them all, you know? Dilwale Dulhaniya.
So Shahrukh's reputation basically as a leading man, a romantic lead in Hindi cinema, was basically laid by this film. So eventually we were going to talk about this movie anyway. It was going to come up. So I thought we might as well just bite the bullet, invite Beth, who from Beth Loves Bollywood, who has a lot of opinions about it and has been booked for this episode forever. And it's also I've seen other people on Twitter talking about why is it so relevant now? Why do we have to talk about it now? Blah, blah, blah. But honestly, this is one of the most studied movies in Bollywood history. And I'm saying specifically Bollywood. I'm not saying Hindi cinema. I mean Bollywood. What does that term mean? Its genesis, how it's affected the last 20-something years of cinema. All of that dates back to this big film. Anupam Chopra has written about it. Rachel Dwyer has written about it. A whole bunch of people have written about this film academically from a pop culture viewpoint. So eventually we were going to talk about DDLJ, and that day is today.
If you are making a comeback, you need to make a comeback with a bang, right? This is it. We're doing DDLJ, deal with it. There's 20 years of academic research about it. There's books written about it. We have read none of those. We've just watched This is still on brand. This is still Khandaan podcast.
I just want to say that, last time I was here, I made you get your monocle out. And so I'm going to do it again because I do have some articles pulled up on my computer.
Awesome. Beth is going to force us to talk about smart things, which is good. That's
if it was not for Beth, you'll still be finding nipples in DDLJ.
Yeah, so before we get to DDLJ, and since you brought nipples up, you saw Student of the Year too. Sujoy, bring us the reports of that event. What was it?
Oh my God! Where do I begin? I think the feeling that I get after watching Student of the Year 2 is that it was rushed to the theater just so that it could make the release window, and they didn't have any other suitable dates for them to release throughout the year. And you can sense that the product seems very rushed, very incoherent, very incompetent, and I don't know why they made that decision in the first place. I guess Dharma doesn't care at this moment because they've already got like 4 big releases or so, or lined up after Kalank and now this, and then they've got Brahmastra and Takht coming up next. It is pretty much a spoof of its own genre, or trying to highlight how Tiger does the ballet flipping over and over again, and I think that's all that it has. It even does not acknowledge the existence of the other people in this movie, and it's I don't know. Like I could, like I was seated with a couple of other desis who were watching this, and people were like commenting on the movie whilst it was happening, and I was enjoying that more than the movie itself. Like there would be like some really terrible line that somebody would say, and this girl beside me, she would say, "Oh, cheese." So that's the best review of this movie that I can tell you about. It's like a verbal eye roll, this entire movie.
I have a question though. Like, how many backflips will Tiger Shroff still do before his brain turns into omelette?
I don't know, man. Like, I don't get his fandom, and if his fandom really exists, is that the fandom is that what appeals to his fandom? As in him doing the gymnastic moves and the flips and kicking, roundhouse kicking and all of that? Is that the only thing that appeals to the fandom? Because he cannot deliver a line to save his life.
Still cannot, huh? And I was ranting about it last time when I was talking about Hero, right? Like that Jackie Shroff has like more charisma in his one little pinky toe than Tiger has with all of this training and all of this preparation and all of these six packs. And it's but I worry about the guy. Like, you know that you have that American football injury CTE. I really think, you know, he might get it if he doesn't like stop flipping around like an idiot the whole time.
Yeah. Because that physical strain will definitely get you at some point, right? He's not going to appear 26 all throughout his career.
Yeah, like I imagine it's gonna be one of those like Coolie situations. We're gonna get a freeze frame, and it's like this is where Tiger fell on his head, and like you know, like he got hurt really bad, and this is you know that's gonna happen. Like, I mean, eventually. I did find it funny because like the movie seemed so bad. Like when people were reviewing it, it's like, but Alia was such a charismatic performer and a student of the year 1. I was like, no, she wasn't. Like she was like the worst part of Student of the Year 1. She became a better actress, but like if you're comparing these new actresses, because it's Ananya Pandey and the other one, I don't know her name, Tara Sutaria.
He literally told you what the name was. And
sorry. Like, she's a YouTuber or something, or she's like talented, right? Like I've heard people like send these tweets of, you know, your fave could never, which I assume means that she's good. Like, right? That's what that tweet means, right? I'm old.
I mean,
I have no clue.
Technically, I think that's what it means, but like, I don't know if it's justified or not. Like, I mean, I could just say your fave could never do like anything, like, you know. But I will say about like what Sujoy said about like how Dharma doesn't seem to care. So Rahul Desai, I think it was Rahul Desai, who works for Film Companion. So it's not like some rando on the internet. So he said on his Twitter feed that apparently after he saw the movie, as he was walking out, some woman stopped him, and he saw her stop other people too, and say, I work for Dharma, and we just wanted to say that we'd really appreciate it if we could say something positive about this film.
Like something, anything.
So, like, and he was just like, I've never had anybody from any production house say anything like this to me ever in my career. So I think like Dharma A knew that it was a stinker, and B, it clearly, like, I don't think they expected Kalank to bite it as hard as it did.
Yes.
So I think like that like really shook them up. So I think like that's sort of the reason why they're suddenly like, oh, we can't really afford for this to crash at the box office as well.
And I also think Kesari underperformed. I mean, it made tons of money, but it cost tons of money. And I think it also underperformed. And I think Dharma's slightly in trouble because they launched these big super nationalistic projects and, you know, like they're not really working for them. And now, you know, like nationalistic, I mean, Kalank and Kesari, not Student of the Year, unless there's some weird angle where, you know, he's tied up Tara Sutaria on a jeep or something like that. Has he? I don't know. Like,
No.
I don't know Tiger like and his kinks. You know, he has some weird ones. So
it's only nipples here.
It's only nipples. Okay.
It's only Tiger's nipples at display in this movie.
I wonder if Tiger has nipples on the back. I've never. I feel like he's so extra. He might have extra nipples. I'm not. I should check. I don't know.
Having said that, like amongst the like we were talking about how Alia was pretty much the weakest link in the original Student of the Year, and eventually became a better actor. But you know, even in that first movie, we saw the spark that Varun had.
Yeah,
and we definitely knew that he's going to be probably the next big thing in his generation of actors. I think amongst Student of the Year too, I think Ananya Pandey. I was about to say Ananya Panda, but she shows some potential with whatever weak material she's been given to work with. And I hope that she gets better, you know, scripts to play and in better movies. But this was such a disservice to the existence of all actors and to cinema itself. Like it's so cinema itself. It's just an excuse of here's like 2 hours of Tiger flipping from one roof to another, pretty much. and even like the music department is so terrible. It's just so derivative of usual pop music that we get to hear, and it's like forgettable and disposable. And there is one R.D. Burman remix that it's also another terrible remix. I don't know if anybody will be remembering the existence of Student of the Year 2, and neither they should.
Oh my God, one more remix? I just wanted to add that in my best Karan Johar impression.
A bit more nasal.
Is it? Oh, sorry. Too much bass. Sujoy, is it because it's a retread of Jo Jeeta Wohi Bandar, right? Like that's...
well, it's got its own twists out to that tale as well. Even the whole sports angle is terrible. Tiger is never an underdog in this, obviously. There is no redeeming quality to either the underdog or the Deepak Tijori character played by that other guy with the hair gel. There's nothing going for this movie. Even like in Jo Jeeta Wohi Sikandar, they had the whole cycle race as the main event. Here they have kabaddi, and I don't see anybody following any kabaddi rules in this movie. Like they don't even give a fuck about holding the breath and saying kabaddi, kabaddi, or they would say in the first 2 seconds of the game, and then it just goes out of the window.
How is Puneet Malhotra's direction? Because he's like a weird one. Like he came in like quite like I Hate Love Stories. I thought that had some moments in it, and then I actually didn't mind Gori Tere Pyar Mein because I watched it much later, and it already had bombed and flopped and stuff like that, and and then I just watched it on TV, and maybe it's because I interviewed both of them when they came around, and I like Imran Khan. I don't like actively hate him. I really like Bebo. So the movie actually worked for me. I was like, wow, I wonder why this didn't do better. And but because the movie bombed, he's not made anything since, and only now he's kind of like, you know, it's weird taking over the mantle from Karan Johar and then trying to make it your own thing. And how did that work out?
I don't think that I see any sort of personal voice or, you know, his own style in his direction at all. It's just very derivative of what Karan Johar achieved with Student of the Year. It's the same aesthetic. It's the same look and feel as well. And I think even with I Hate Love Stories, he's doing a take of Karan Johar cinema in showing this is how Bollywood is, and I don't know. I haven't seen Gori Tere Pyar Mein, so I don't really know what he has done in that. But this again, there is no. I don't see his personal contribution in this, even though I don't know if anybody has contributed anything in this movie.
I wonder if that's a thing with Dharma, just Karan sort of influencing his directors in a way, subconsciously or whatever, to just make a certain kind of tone across his cinema, and that just sort of makes everything bleed together.
But what was the other director, Karan Malhotra, who did the Agnipath remake? That was a completely different voice from what Dharma has, right?
True.
So that was very, very strong. But with directors like Puneet Malhotra, I don't see that.
What is Karan doing next?
Takht. Takht, right?
No, Karan Malhotra.
Karan Malhotra. I think he switched teams. He's not with Dharma anymore.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think he switched team, which was, I think they had a really bad time with Brothers.
Yes, that's true.
And also another movie that kind of underperformed, where I thought it would be doing much better. He's doing Shamshera for Yashraj.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. So he went, but he didn't go far. It's still all kind of in the same wheelhouse.
Just next door.
Yeah. Great. What else did we want to talk about? There's so much to catch up, but I don't think we want to go. We don't want to go back and talk about everything that we missed out on our break, because there's so much. I know people probably want to hear about our thoughts about Bharat. My thoughts are Katrina is awesome, and I'm looking forward to the movie, which is coming out in a couple of weeks. So we're going to be talking about it then. I don't know if you want to go into the shitstorm of Kangana and Hrithik. I think we all kind of want to avoid, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Kalank, I think Kalank, it just bombed, right? It bombed, right? I saw a little video of Varun Dhawan, on Instagram or something, where he was my movie didn't do well and I'm going to Thailand to do some kickboxing. So I was like, wow. when the movie does so bad that you want to get kicked in the face, that's terribly disappointing. But
I just saw the Wikipedia page for Kalank, and it barely broke even, I think. Yeah.
And I think Varun had a lot riding on it, more than anybody, because he's I think he really feels that he cannot get into the kind of prestige cinema, He's gonna be B grade, Judwa, that kind of movies is working, but he's not
and he's doing Coolie #1 next.
Yeah. And I think there's I think Ranveer has kind of paced through, where you would have thought that he would be in the sphere where Varun is, right? More because his sensibility is more B grade cinema. But he's paced through, and I feel Varun is feeling it. He's feeling the heat.
But then him and Alia seem to be the misfits in that whole world of Kalank. They don't say, their whole tonality of how they deliver dialogue and their conviction of this timeless love story, it doesn't really work, because they're so contemporary in the way that they deliver speech. All the Urdu that they're speaking just seems like lines that they are made to utter. And that's where one of the big failures of why Kalank doesn't connect, or we don't see the whole romantic side of things. But then there are many other bigger flaws of Kalank that we may or may not discuss anymore, but because nobody else is interested in it. So,
Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge, directed by Aditya Chopra. I think it came out in 95. Right, 95, right?
Yeah.
Again, I find it hard to talk about this movie because there's so much to talk about this movie. It changed Hindi cinema forever. It's a movie that's milestone pe milestone. There's so many records it broke. And I think it's one of those movies because watching it back, it really brought me back that I watched this movie when I was like 14, 15 years old. And at that age, you wanted to live this love story, you wanted to be Raj and Simran to a certain degree. And it's just a really weird feeling to revisit that kind of like, wow, I wanted to, like, I thought this was my life or I wanted this life or I wanted this love story. And it's just like weird, like looking at it back 20 years later. And then I also watched the making of. Apparently, this was one of the first movie where they put a lot of effort in kind of making a backstage behind
the scenes.
And it was shot by Aditya Chopra and Karan Johar. They were kind of like, you guys take it over. And I was watching it and clearly they had no idea how to make like a back behind the scene because it's so raw. It's like they put stuff in it that like would not fly. It's like super unfiltered. And it's like also just weird to see Aditya Chopra and talk. And like, I've never seen him talk. I've never seen his face that much. You see one still image of him, but you never see him move around. So I was like, wow, okay, this is Aditya Chopra.
He exists.
Yeah, he does. And like, I didn't know. I honestly had never seen it before.
Well, he even went to the Filmfare Awards to receive the Best Director.
Yeah, and it was a long ass speech. Like I forwarded it because we just went on for 20 minutes. I was like, iske baad kuch nahi kehna. Like I don't want to say anything after this. I'm gone. Like this is.
No, when he says at the end, like this might not happen again. He wasn't saying that he wouldn't get a Filmfare Award. Like he was not going to come back.
Yeah.
Even though Filmfare is held at Yash Raj Studios now. But
yeah. So yeah, I mean, let's start at least, right? Like, I think I want to kind of go with Beth because I was surprised that you do not like this movie to this extent. I did not know.
Oh, really?
I did not. Amrita pointed this out to me.
Yeah. So I actually like what you were saying, Asim, about like how you saw it when you were like 14, 15 and like this is what romance like meant to you. I think that's pretty much the same reaction that like I expect Sujoy had the same reaction. I know that I had that reaction because we were all, we were all like desi kids and like we saw it at a certain point in time. But Beth, you saw this as an adult, right?
Yeah. I mean, I saw this at 31.
Yeah.
I, am a white American. My family has, and I'm not from an immigrant. Like my family came to the U.S. 100 and whatever years ago. So like not a single iota of this is for me. And I think that's really important before any more of my opinion comes out. Like I know that this movie is not for me, but there are a lot of Indian movies that are not for me that I love. So
so that was actually, I think like that's really interesting. Like tell us more about like how you discovered this movie and like the first time you watched it.
Well, what Asim was saying, and when we started this show, is that this is required watching when you are new to Hindi cinema of any kind, or probably even Indian cinema, right? Like you have to watch this, and you're supposed to like it. You're really, really supposed to like this movie and think it's romantic. And those are both the fact that this movie reads as romantic to adults is upsetting to me, and I don't understand it. And I know other North Americans who, again, are not from Indian ancestry whatsoever, who also saw this movie, maybe in their late 20s or 30s, and they think it's romantic. So it's not a cultural issue necessarily. Somehow this movie works for a large chunk of people, but it has never worked for me whatsoever in terms of any of the love that is supposed to be depicted or inspired by it. There are other things about it that I do think work pretty well. And this rewatch actually made me kind of appreciate this movie more than I ever have before. But I'm just, the love for this film baffles me utterly.
And you're also like, you're a huge Shahrukh fan, or you were, right?
Yeah.
So it's not even that. Like, it's not like
you
hate Shahrukh.
Not at all. Although I do think that this film takes everything that's annoying about Shahrukh and cranks it up. So I can understand if you don't like Shahrukh that this movie would drive you bananas.
And I was surprised that I saw this in the making of and reading about it. Shahrukh did not want to do this role. Like, he did not want to go down this route. He didn't want to be a romantic hero. And like he was like already like a star at that time, and he was like really doing these darker and different kind of movies like Bazigar Dar, and like, you know, even like if you go back to Raju Ban Gaya Gentleman and all these kind of movies, they were really, really different. And I think he really wanted to be like an actor, but and to a certain degree it feels like a gift and a curse, like this movie for him, right? Like it set his Raj image in stone. And he's, like so many people say, he's been playing Raj ever since. Some version of Raj. And if he didn't want to do it the first time, like, imagine having to do it for like 20 years. Like, what is the, you know?
There's an amazing moment in the making of video where like, he's clearly pissed off. And he's like in this bullock cart or something in the middle of the field in Punjab or whatever. And you can see like he's like annoyed and being like, you know, for whatever reason. And then Karan goes up to him with the camera and is just like, so Shahrukh, do you want to tell us something about this film that we're making? And you can see how mad he is. And he says something, I can't remember the exact quote, but he says something like, well, you want me to tell you what it is? Fine. It's like a fundamental, it's an exploration of the fundamental revolt against the bourgeoisie.
I saw, that was so funny. That was so funny.
And it was just hilarious because you could just see like Karan being like, okay, I'll come back later then.
I was going to say, Amit, I'm remembering that, you know, years ago when you and I did a podcast series on iconic women characters in Hindi cinema, and we talked about Simran for a little bit. We had our friend Ira on, who blogs about older Hindi cinema, and she said, she and I are the same age. So I was interested to hear from someone who did not see it as a teenager because it didn't exist when she was a teenager, right? She was a little bit older. And she said, this is fundamentally not a love story between Simran and Raj. It is fundamentally a love story between Raj and Baldev.
Oh, totally.
I remember that. I remember
that is absolutely correct. And it's a love story about the coming together of two sets of cultural values, and how they do both compromise a little bit, and that kind of thing. And that to me makes this movie make a whole lot more sense when you think about it's not about romance actually at all.
Just before going on this episode, I posted a tweet saying we're going to be talking about the biggest love story of Bollywood, aka How I Met Your Father.
When I was taking notes and the whole pigeon thing was happening, I wrote down, this is basically seduction of Bauji. This is what's going on. Like,
yeah, pretty much. He's making the moves.
Yeah. Like,
ow.
And like Shahrukh's reactions there are sort of more endearing than they are with Kajol, I think. Like, he knew what
they
this
were all
was about.
He just freestyled that whole thing that was not written, which is pretty darn amazing, right? Like it's
which is probably why it has an effect.
Yeah. And while I was also taking notes, like I just wrote like iconic, like, you know, like so many times while I was watching this movie, like there's so many, like, and I probably will do it during our chat. Like there's so many things in this movie that are just like part of our, like, you know, iconic. There's no better word for it. They're iconic. Like it's crazy.
I mean, this movie has been mined for so many scenes, so many concepts, the music, the situations, like straight up lifted. It's not even like it inspired things in like Indian TV or I don't know about Pakistani culture. Like, I don't know if like it was.
It's there. Like,
okay.
And it's like also a shorthand. You just play one note and you know what it is. You know, there's it's crazy. Like
all the Kadwa Chauth, like, you know, the fasting scenes that I have seen, and okay, fine, I don't really watch Indian TV that much, so maybe I'm not the best person to be talking about it, but the few scenes that I have seen over the years since this movie came out, every single one of them starts with the same premise, you know, like you will have the Kadwa Chauth, but like the guy will also fast because that's what Raj did for Simran. Like nobody spells it out like that, but that is the that is sort of the expectation. Like you see like girls on social media or something like talking about like how they want a husband like Raj. And I'm just like, really, would you? But like what they remember is this one scene where like, Shahrukh is like, oh, I haven't eaten either because like you weren't eating. And then it's like, oh, so cute. and
that's what's baffling about this, right? Is that everyone can remember all these different bits of it. Yet what they do sort of most actively remember, what lingers with them, is the few moments in isolation, like what you're talking about. Because when you break down the sort of behavior of the romantic leads, like I don't think it holds up.
Yeah, Raj is pretty much physically violent towards.
He's terrible. He is beyond redemption. Awful.
I had completely forgotten about all of that. You're absolutely right. Like I was watching this movie this time around, and I was just like, wait, why is he just throwing her around like a rag doll? Like what the hell?
I'm coming back to my theory that Shahrukh does not like Kajol. Like he does not like her. Like he loves Rani. He does not like Kajol. Like you can take you just look at their physical behavior towards each other, and it's definitely like a lot of one-sided violence, because it seems like Kajol has a lot of like off-screen antics, and then when she's on screen, she's on, like she's an actress. And Shahrukh just takes those moments to take his revenge of what she's doing off screen. I think that's what's going on.
That could be a theory, though.
Yeah. But going back to like what Beth was saying about like this is fundamentally a love story between like the two men. That sounded wrong, but you know what I mean. Wait, what was I going to say? I completely forgot.
You were talking about latent homosexuality. Daddy issues
between Raj and Kuljit.
I can't remember. Oh yeah, now I remember. So there's something that Shahrukh said once about like Aditya Chopra, which I think is like very true. And I think he said this around the time that Rab Ne Bana Di Jodi came out, where he said that basically the difference between Yash Chopra and Adi is that Yash Chopra wrote movies about women, whereas Aditya Chopra writes movies about men. But the thing is, like, people just get it confused because they have like, they're like good parts for women in Aditya Chopra's movies. So they think like, oh, like, and they're love stories. So they think like, oh, okay. But they're all fundamentally about the men. It's about their pain, their evolution, their problems, all of that. And then the woman is just basically a catalyst. She's not really like, the movie's not about her. It's not about Anushka in Rab Ne Bana Di Jodi. It's not about Aishwarya in Mohabbatein. And it's not about Simran in DDLJ.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Aditya Chopra is a weird one, isn't he? Like, I think a lot of people have issues with him. And you probably have those issues with him too, right? Like I think we've like and it's weird because he's like he's not that present. Like he's not like a celebrity.
He's not present. He's omnipresent.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
Yeah, and it's a weird choice. Like I don't see anybody else make that choice, being in such a powerful position and yet never be. It's a smart strategic choice, I would say, like you're there, you kind of like, is he the most powerful man in Bollywood at the moment, or is it Karan Johar?
I think Karan makes more noise, but but Yashraj actually,
which is the understatement of ever.
But I think like Yashraj actually does like more business. Then, like, Yashraj is a proper studio. It's like one of the few remaining studios, whereas Dharma is really a production house. Like, they produce movies and everything, but they don't have like the backing that Yashraj has. Like, Yashraj can turn out like middling movies for the next 10 years, and I think they'll be fine. But Dharma, I think, is like a little bit worried right now with what they're doing with their slate.
Right.
Well, as much as you can't really understand Hindi cinema of the last 20 30 whatever years without talking about this film, or at least thinking about this film. You definitely can't without Yash Raj films. So I think his influence as a director, I think, is probably fairly minimal by this point, because also the last movie he made was just, again, terrible, and it has had no influence whatsoever. And obviously this one has, and I think
it was Befikre, right?
Right. And Rob Nibani has had some influence, I think, but the other two, he hasn't actually made that many films as a creator, but he's backed, and for whatever role the creative process has in backing, he's absolutely incredibly influential.
But yeah, he's not made that many movies, but I will always be eternally grateful that he gave us Anushka Sharma with Rab Ne Bana Di Jodi, so I cannot, take that away. But
and Ranveer Singh for Ban Baja Barat.
Yeah, true. Yeah. I mean,
and even more than Karan, he's got an eye for talent, I think. So
yeah. Or he employs people who have like an eye for talent.
Yeah, that's definitely the better.
But he's like if Yash Raj is a studio, he's like a proper studio head, right? Yeah. And I don't think Yash Chopra ever was. Right, Yash Chopra was kind of a creative director, and he was like one of the best directors at that time, right? Like a Yash Chopra movie was an event. Being a Yash Chopra heroine was a thing. But now he's really like what Yash Raj Films is now is because of Aditya Chopra. And I do think there have been many missteps. But they also take chances, which also sometimes bomb. Like, on the one hand, you have terrible mistakes like Neil and Nikki. But on the other hand, you have movies like, Tashan, Mujhse Friendship Karoge. You have, Jhoom Barabar Jhoom, which these movies that are chances, glossy, expensive chances that didn't connect with the audiences. Rocket Singh, another one I think about. I think that was also Yash Raj, right? And years later, you come back to them and you're like, wow, those were actually really good movies. Like, Rocket Singh was really good. Jhoom Barabar is actually really good. People go rewatch that movie. It's really good. Tashan, my position on it always. So it's an and again, like Mujhse Friendship Karoge, it's a gem of a movie. Like, it's so good. And it really tapped into that kind of like what young people are doing, and like no other person does. And when you compare it to Dharma, who's taking chances, although Dharma doesn't take that many chances, right? Kesari was a surefire hit, would have been. Like, it taps into Akshay Kumar playing real people. It has like a big budget of action, blood. It has the whole patriotic jhanda waving, and it still bombed, right? So
I think what Dharma does is basically, they both sort of reflect the man at the helm, I suppose, because what Dharma does is it doesn't really lead. What it does is it takes concepts that other people have done well, and then tries to make it like bigger and like
Disneyfies it, basically. Disneyfies it.
Basically.
Yeah.
I think coming back to like DDLJ, just spinning off from that idea that Dharma, sort of picks up on a particular existing successful idea, is that Karan Johar started off his career as working second fiddle or as a sidekick, assistant director on set for DDLJ, and that's where he got his first exposure of making a movie, and that's what he considers like Aditya Chopra is his mentor or confidant in everything that he does. And DDLJ was that particular success story that sort of inspires him throughout his life, and you can see that very evidently in the making videos where they say that before DDLJ, like Yash Raj was still making high budget, good production value movies like Lamhe and Dar, Chandni before this, but Hindi movies of the mid 90s or the early 90s were like in the same year. If you have a look at DDLJ came out, movies like Coolie Number One, Sabse Bada Khiladi, Ram Jane were being made. So that was the film aesthetic that we were still struggling with. But post DDLJ, we come into the world where a Bollywood movie or the or the Yash Raj school of cinema was a thing, and that kind of spins off the idea of why Dharma will always be a follower in that sense.
Yeah, I think like DDLJ was like, well, I think they were beginning to use like so I think like DDLJ basically like capitalized on a bunch of like actual thoughts that was already floating around the industry at the time, and then like sort of solidified it. And I think that has to do with like how young Aditya was at that time, and the fact that he was just very plugged in, so he knew what was happening. So I remember like back in the day when Hum came out, the Amitabh Bachchan movie came out. I think, so the Juma Chuma De De song, that was actually, I think, one of the very first songs, like not even the movie, just the song was like one of the first where they actually had a stylist come in and sort of like design like the look of that song. Yeah. That's why like everybody has that white mug and like, he's wearing that
black and white.
Yeah, exactly. And then she's wearing red and she's like the only pop of color on the stage and everything. So
what an iconic look,
right. like all these years later, like everybody remembers that song. Everybody remembers the look of that song. Like it's just distinct. So I think like the idea to like film is like a visual medium and we need to sort of like think about those things. And I think that sort of tied in also to who Yash Chopra was, because if you see his the way he used to frame his heroines, like everyone talks about the Yash Chopra heroines, but the reason why they talk about the Yash Chopra heroines is because he presented them in like a very like it's almost like a painting. Like if you see Rekha in Silsila or Sri Devi in Chandni or something, it's just beautifully designed frames that like showcase these women. So I think like Aditya, having grown up in that environment and having like spent all those years doing research into, Hindi cinema as it was at that time, I think he actually had like an idea of where he was and where he wanted to go. And then Karan basically just came and, like sort of followed and like, did put his own twist on it.
Yeah, I mean, even after that, even Yash Raj movies like Mujhse Dosti Karoge almost followed that template and tried to recreate the Yash Chopra, film aesthetic, I suppose. But then you like move 20 years fast forward and you have movies like Student of the Year and Student of the Year 2, and you don't really remember what the aesthetic was. It was pretty much like bare-chested men and sports bras for women,
or sports bra for some men.
True.
In 96, when Dilwale Dulhaniya won the Filmfare Best Movie Award, they were competing against Akele Hum, Akele Tum, Karan Arjun, Raja and Rangila. And I think just to kind of give you an idea what else was out there, Rangila I feel was very like also kind of like breaking from the mold of Bollywood. But the rest was really much old school Bollywood. Yeah. And there is what Dilwale did is it opened up I don't know if it opened up, but the NRI market opened up at the same time. And I think there's a clear trend line you can see between Hum Aapke Hain Kaun, Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge, and Kuch Kuch Hota Hai. These three movies, they kind of built off the success of the other one, and they kind of like perfected that NRI outside India market. And obviously things were going global. Brands were coming in. There was a level of professionalism, and it all kind of like these three movies rode the wave. And it really tapped into something that, we were feeling that we wanted, and we wanted our movies to be. And I think these three movies are just like for always linked together because of that. And it was just fun.
Like Shahrukh in the making video, he says like, earlier Amitabh Bachchan movies like Naseeb and all, they did well overseas. But then it kind of died down in the 80s and the 90s until like movies like Hum Aapke Hain Kaun and DDLJ took on that.
I liked also that Manish Malhotra said something that Dilwale brought back a movie looking good. And that is also something that Bollywood had forgotten. And I think that's true. Again, take out Hum Aapke Hain Kaun out of that equation. But before that, like, if you just compare, Akele Hum Akele Tum, Raja, those kind of movies. Even Andaz Apna Apna came out last year, and it was competing against Krantiveer Mohra. These kind of movies, they do not look good. Like, they look like really dirt cheap. Sure.
The thing with like, that's like a point. But I think like even with movies like Hum Aapke Hain Kaun, I wouldn't say that the movies looked good. I think and you still see this today, I think, where like old school producers like the Barjatias, what they wanted was something that looks grand, which is like a fundamentally different concept than like good, like looking good, So you're like, badi si set hai, like, it's like very shandar looking, and like, you have everyone's living in like a giant haveli. And that
a giant's
like,
living room with a staircase.
Exactly.
Right.
The set design.
Like, that hasn't changed since Maine Pyar Kiya for Rajashri, right?
Exactly. Every time I see that living room, I'm just like, who lives in this house and what is wrong with them? Like, literally like two spindly like staircases, and then there's one giant living room. I've always wanted to like go to like the Bajatia house in Mumbai, just to, like see if that's how they live also. Like they just like, this is how we all live. But yeah, like I think that's like a fundamental difference. And like Manish Malhotra, like his entire career, I think he owes it to Yash Raj and
Sharmishta Roy.
Yeah. Except like Sharmishta Roy, I think is like, my opinion of Sharmishta Roy is like higher.
Than Manish Malhotra?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And also, like, speaking about grand and budget, low budget, I didn't feel that DDLJ feels like a big budget movie necessarily. Like,
I agree.
Watching it now, I was like, is this a high budget movie? I don't think it is, because if I compare, like, if we go a few years back, like we had 1942, A Love Story came out in 95, Khalnayak came out in 94, Khuda Gawah came out in 93. I would feel all of these movies probably had a higher budget than DDLJ, which is basically on a rail pass, and like they hired buses. I mean, it was a smart move, and I can't imagine, even Shahrukh and Kajol cost that much to hire them compared to Anil Kapoor or Amitabh at that time, right? So in a way,
yeah, I think most of their budget probably went to like the Europe portion.
Yeah. But even then, they were like traveling in buses together, and in the bus they had the catering and the cameraman and the stars all together in one bus, right? So it's like there is a definite break between here and what I imagine Kuch Kuch Hota Hai did, right? Where like look at the campus, look at the branded wear they're wearing, and there was always this story where Karan Johar went to London to do shopping and buy these brands of like 10,000 for 20,000 pounds and bringing in these jackets, and his dad was like, "What the hell are you doing, dude?" So there's definitely. It felt very low budget to me rewatching the movie in a way. So, which makes it even more impressive that it ran for 19 years in Maratha Mandir. Have you guys ever been to Maratha Mandir to watch this?
I have been.
Yeah. Where is Maratha? Is that in Delhi? Is that in Bombay? Where is that?
It's in Mumbai.
Bombay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bombay.
What is it like?
It's still
they don't show it anymore, right? They did stop eventually.
It still does.
Oh, it does? Okay.
So a word on the street is basically Yash Raj has pretty much bought that slot,
right?
And so it doesn't really need any profit because they're already made however money they wanted to make from it. But right now it's just got the 11:30 a.m. slot in Maratha Mandir, and it just plays every day.
And it's still probably selling. Like it's probably still a challenge to get tickets, I imagine, right? Like it's not.
Well, I went on a Tuesday screening at 11:30 a.m. and it was like 50% occupancy.
That's wow. That is impressive, man. 50% occupancy still. Like we're
not even Kalan got that.
Ooh.
Burn.
I felt that burn all the way here.
Deep burn. So, shall we start talking about the movie itself a little bit? Which we haven't really done yet. So we start off with Baldev Singh on Trafalgar Square, who's messing up London's ecosystem by feeding pigeons.
Is still to this day there are signs in Hindi at Trafalgar Square instructing people not to feed the pigeons
because of
that's
Amrish
the cultural
Puri.
impact, or that's the actual impact that movie had. Because there will be Desi flocking to Trafalgar Square just to feed the pigeons.
I wonder what it was like in 1996 when the first wave arrived and all the British were just like, what the is going on?
Yeah.
Everybody from Southall is here.
And why are they all in dhotis?
Before we leave this scene, I want to just say that I hadn't remembered this as the kind of the introduction to the film, and it was genuinely sad to me. I feel very bad for him for about 30 seconds because the cultural isolation is a real thing. Yeah. You have obviously the contrast in the gray skies with the fields that you'll see later and all that stuff. But then he instantly ruins it because you know that the reason he feels isolated is because he has never tried even the tiniest bit to even acknowledge where he lives now and has lived for 20 years and has apparently never gone home in the interim time. But I feel like they could have made this character a lot more sympathetic than they did.
But
because he has a moment there, and I don't know how they filmed this with there's nobody else in Trafalgar Square.
It was super early. It was super early in the morning. I remember that. When they in some making of, I saw they went 4 a.m. or something like that to it. They did not have the budget to shut down Trafalgar Square, so they just went super early.
Guerrilla.
Yeah. But this is also funny because
I think that works because it makes the sky is grayer. There's less sunshine. There's it is so cold and empty feeling.
And speaking of Amrish Puri, I love Amrish Puri, just generally.
Absolutely.
But he was always a villain. This was the first movie where he started transitioning to, a patriarchal figure. I would say Muskurahat before that, a couple of years. It was just 2 years before something started it. But this was really the first transition, and he was still for us, he was still a villain. Right? So there was always this discomfort seeing him as a dad, because we'd been seeing him, having black label whiskey in clubs and that kind of thing, and lots and lots of mullets.
Mm-hmm.
So it was he was Mogambo, so seeing him as a dad in a rom-com, it was a weird feeling for us. And again, it's something that then Dharma and Karan Johar kind of focused more on. Amitabh started doing these patriarchal role where there was a flip. He was a hero, but now he's kind of playing villainous patriarchal roles. So it was new for us. And so yeah, I think it was kind of an interesting casting choice, because Anupam Kher wanted to do that role. And I think it was really, really smart to have Amrish Puri. And I mean, tapping into this thing that, that Beth, you're saying that this is a guy that has never connected where he's living. The truth of the matter is that that's a lot of people. I think in the making of Pamela Chopra was saying that, when they visit London, what they find with the NRI people is that their image of India has stopped from the moment they left India.
Sure.
So and I see that in Pakistan. I see that with my parents. They have no clue about what's going on in Pakistan at this time. For them, Pakistan is what was when they left in 70s, and it has not moved, and they've just taken that part of what they knew and they've created their little world in whatever country they've moved to, same morals, same kind of way of dressing. And it's unbelievably oppressive for the people that want to grow up, and have that kind of freedom.
Families, we now live in a world which is very well connected, not only in terms of television, we've got multiple number of television channels now, but we also have the internet, so we can watch whatever we want from wherever we want. But this is the mid-90s we're talking about, so yeah, I sense that sort of isolation still exists.
But I will say that even with all the, like, I know, like, you know, like, I can see how India has changed. I come back very often to India. Like, even when I live abroad, like, you know, I come back at least like 3 or 4 times a year. But I will say that even then, like, it's like very difficult to actually understand what's happening on like a ground level and like a really like intrinsic level with the people, unless you actually live there, because there are things that happen in this country that I am just shocked by. Like, I'm just like, I don't mean like big things like Narendra Modi becoming prime minister. I don't mean things like that. I mean like little things, you know, like the way I see young women behave, the way I see young men behave, the way, the things that they believe, the things that they feel comfortable expressing or like acting or like doing in public. And I'm just like, I, at that age, would never have done like any of those things. And I'm just like, oh, wow. Like, this is a completely new generation. Like, things have changed, and I thought I knew how much they've changed. But when you spend like more extended periods of time in India or in Pakistan or Bangladesh or wherever you come from, and then you kind of see the people there after a gap, you can actually sense how the culture has changed way more than you can like if you just come back for a holiday.
I can't believe you used the phrase little things and then did not continue with the rest of the quote from this movie.
Oh, senorita, I have had like enough of that. The moment Barack Obama said it, I was just like, you know what? We're done.
So then Baldev Singh walks to his gas station where he works. And I don't want to do like a, you know, everything wrong with DDLJ kind of thing. The YouTube is there
cinema
for
sins.
Yeah, we don't want to do a cinema sins kind of thing. But his, like, I don't know, like, clearly this was a time before Google Maps, because I don't know what, you know, way he's walking. But okay, let's just take it. But this is the first time I actually thought of this, and I'd never thought of this before. Maybe he doesn't own that gas station. Maybe he just works there. And if I think about it that way, it just changes everything. Like, because I remember, like, I know this idea of back when you go home, you are a chaudhry. You have a high status, you know, you're the head of the family, you're respected, and you're respected because you're living outside of the country. But when you are actually living those lives, you're actually just doing menial jobs. And suddenly that realization that he doesn't own this gas station, and that's also maybe why, and he also doesn't own the house he's living in. He's renting that house, and that's why they could basically pack up and leave everything. They didn't sell the house, they didn't sell the gas station. He just left the house and he just went. And maybe that's what it is. And I just never had that realization before today, like before yesterday while watching that movie, which was kind of making me sad, but it also felt very, very real. And again, maybe one of those aspects, like Amrish Puri's vision on where he lives, it's not something that they tapped into enough. Maybe they didn't tap into enough, you know, how NRIs are living here, because they couldn't put that focus in, but it felt very, very real to me. He gets a call from Farida Jalal, which is kind of sweet. Is that sweet? That kind of like calling dad every day thing?
That's it over here.
In this case, I think it's controlling. I think that he told her to do that 20 years ago and she's never stopped.
Entirely possible.
No, I'm dead serious. I don't think that there's anything that she does in the relationship with him that is innate from her.
This movie also kind of brought back Farida Jalal, and she kind of mentioned it, that she could actually, you know, quote her price, and she was getting so many roles after this. Like she was doing like roles here and there before that, but this really like gave her like that, you know, that Niruparai cash money, you know, like that sweet Rima Lagu check, that sweet Kiron Kher money, you know, which you need to wait for a while before you can get that. Yeah, good for her. And we get kind of an intro in Farida's life. We get introduced to Chutki, who's a precocious 12-year-old. are you guys annoyed with Chutki? Because apparently a lot of people hate Chutki. I don't. But
no, I don't either. I like her.
Yeah, Chutki's fine.
Okay,
Yeah,
Chutki's fine, right? Yeah, I think Chutki's pretty
I know a
cool.
Chutki.
Yeah, I know a Chutki too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we get the heroine pre-makeover Kajol reveal, who's opening very windows when it's really windy, and she writes terrible poetry. What do you guys think of Simran in this movie? Sujoy, I wanna ask you, because I heard a little bit from Beth and Amrita, because I remember I was like 14, like full hormonal at that time, and her introduction is pretty, like, she's in a towel and she's like having a very kind of like towel dance. I never had any like Kajol. I never really found her like as a like, how am I sensitively
like you used to look at Sonam back in the day, and or Kimi Katkar.
Yeah, like, I don't know. No, those were not my particular kings, but glad they were for you. But yeah, she's kind of a very unique kind of different kind of presence on cinema, where even she's jumping around on a towel, she's wearing like the shortest dress in that Rain song, but we never connected like Karisma Kapoor wearing short dresses, right? There's a certain playfulness. Is it Kajol, or is it the way Aditya Chopra shot her in the movie? What do you think?
I really don't know. Well, the first time I saw DDLJ, I was way too young, 11 years old. So yeah, and I mean, my recollection of Kajol as Simran was like far away from the sexualized image of 90s heroines that we were, typically seeing on screen that time.
Yeah.
So completely different way of portraying a female character.
But because it never felt like layering, like she was just like in the towel, she's jumping around. I never felt like it was sensual or anything like that. Like that short dress in the rain she's wearing, it never felt...
it's all very jhalli.
Yeah, it's like she's with her mom. Like there's no and that's a conscious decision, right? That Rangila came out the same year. Like let me remind you guys about layering. Right?
I was refused to go to the I was refused to go to the cinema to watch Rangila, but they were fine with me watching Mere Khabo Mein Jo Hai.
Man, dude, if you had seen Rangila at 11 years old, your life would have been totally different, I imagine.
I know.
There's certain times when, like, you see something at a certain age and it just changes you completely. I think that might have been something. Maybe you should have seen Rangila, man.